Hey everyone, it's John here from MCKAY, back with another video. This video is the 2022-2023 NHL Fantasy Preview, so I try to make this video every year. So we're going to do different things with fantasy on this channel. A live stream, videos. I do have a podcast coming out, Lucas and I talking with an NHL fantasy individual. So we're going to go big time into fantasy this year, talking a lot about it. So this is the individual video I have a few weeks prior to the season, and then we're going to build into it going into the start of the season. So if you're a new subscriber, welcome. I hope to see you on the channel more. Hit that like button. It does help the channel a lot. If you're a new subscriber, drop a comment as well. I do want to see your opinion there. I'm going to try to reply to you. And if you have any questions on fantasy, whether it's throughout the season, waiver pickups, or whatever it is, definitely drop a comment and hit that notification bell so you get notified when I drop videos or streams. So let's get right into it. We're going to go through musts, potential bust picks, breakouts, sleeper picks, bounce back candidates. Let's go through all of it. Starting with the must. So there's a bunch of must picks. I mean, I probably missed a few, but I just kind of ripped through it on what I think. Pasternak's my must pick for the Boston Bruins. I think there's a few other must picks in terms of long term, like McAvoy, Marchand, the injury stuff. Like, if you're taking Marchand in the top 100 picks, like later towards that, like you're getting a dub because you're not going to have him for the first couple months potentially. But if you're confident in your team and you're confident you're going to make the playoffs, Marchand's a great pick. But Pasternak's definitely the must pick here. I think he's going to have a great year. The Tkachuk brothers every year, especially with the hitting, the shot totals, everything, power play points. Tkachuk brothers are both dub picks. Aho and Svechnikov for Carolina. You see Freddie Anderson on that list as well. Patrick Kane, Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Huberdeau. Gimme picks every time. Seider, Heiskanen, a couple younger defensemen that you definitely should pick if you're trying to have a solid defense core. Demko, a little risky in terms of what are we expecting from the Canucks, but Demko's going to put up good numbers, and I would expect some shutouts from Demko. Jack Campbell on the Oilers, I think in the Pacific Division, he's a dub for getting points. Jack Hughes and Stützle, two younger players that I think are must at this point. I don't even think they're breakout candidates anymore. I think some people are saying they're going to break out. I think they're going to break out in a big way, so they are a breakout candidate, but to me, they're a must pick. I think especially if you get later on and they're available, get them. DeBrincat, I think available. If you're confident he's going to get 35 goals plus, I mean, he's a lock. McKinnon, Makar, Rantanen, I think those three guys in Colorado, dub picks. Barkov, Ekblad, dub picks for Florida. Kaprizov, I mean, he's the only guy I'm looking at as a reliable pick on Minnesota at this point. But there's obviously other guys in the wild you can pick up and probably be reliable fantasy guys, but Kaprizov's the only must pick. Panarin, Fox, Shesterkin, Zibanejad, I think all must picks at this point. More so, at least in my eyes, Fox. I just think there's in that spot where Panarin's going to be at, you could go other directions. I just think Fox, if Makar's off the board, there's not too many guys I'd pick over Fox. Maybe Hedman, depending on the scenario. And maybe I do have a little bit of a bias towards Roman Josi. So Josi is another guy. Looking through that list again, Point, Kucherov, Vasilevsky, Hedman, Stamkos. I mean, the only guy I'd have some hesitation on is Stammer just because of his health sometimes, and same thing with Point because of his injury last year. But in terms of Kucherov, Vasilevsky, Hedman, no doubters there. Stammer, as I said, he'll get goal totals, but as you see on the next guy, Matthews, I mean, if you have Matthews available at the 3 spot, not going to be a bad pick for you. I mean, I think McDavid and Draisaitl might have 1 and 2. If Matthews is available at 3, I think it's between, at least for myself, Matthews and Makar. Marner, must pick. The amount of power play points, the amount of points he'll rack up with Matthews, as I already talked about. Josi. Crosby, if he stays healthy, I would select him in the top 15 if he's healthy. Quinn Hughes, must pick at this point for defense. I would put him in my top 7, probably defense for fantasy easily. Carlson, Ovechkin, must picks. Ehlers, Connor, must picks. Eichel, Stone. Again, health big time. They are risky picks, but for me, Eichel and Stone, especially once you get through a few rounds, if those guys are available, must picks. So there's a bunch of other must picks you could argue throughout the league. I think you look at, there's a bunch of like middle tier guys that I have on here that are just my preference, but there's a bunch of other must picks that you could probably determine yourself. Discussing potential bust picks. I'm not saying these are going to be for sure bust picks, but just in terms of a couple tandems to stay away from. The Ottawa and Toronto tandems are just too risky in my eyes. I wouldn't take either tandem unless you're taking both later. Like if you're getting both Murray and Samsonov or both Talbot and Forsberg and you're just confident in the team, like you're confident in the Leafs, you're confident in the Sens, then take both. I don't look at either tandem right now, and I'm not confident in either tandem in terms of one guy standing out. So if you're going to take both later on, go for it. Bobrovsky, I just think it's risky in itself because if Spencer Knight steps up. But I think Bobrovsky, again, if it's later on, go for it. Later on, I would do it, but just not early on. Duchesne, Johansson, I just don't think they're going to repeat what they just did. At least Duchesne, again, they could both have productive years, and I think Duchesne will play well. But again, his production versus where he could get drafted is a little risky for me. Barrie and Petrie are two defensemen that getting older, and there's guys on their team that could step up in front of them, like Bouchard for the Oilers and Letang ahead of Petrie. If Petrie's not getting power play time the way he was getting it like in Montreal, and he still wasn't productive in the first half of the year, just stay away. But again, later on, you might take a chance on him. It's just Ty Smith is there, Letang's there. Barrie, I would pick later on as well, but again, Bouchard might get that spot, and Broberg's coming in as well. And Nurse also gets power play time, so we'll see. Kapanen, the fact that Pittsburgh's, they're keeping Raquel, so I think it's really risky to get a guy like Kapanen. I know some people are taking risks with him later in the draft. Wenberg, he's no longer the Seattle second-line center as far as I'm concerned, especially if Wright made the team, but I think Yanni Gore is going to get a lot of time. Wenberg might get power play 2 time in my eyes, but Beniers is there now. Take Beniers. Gallagher, there's a few guys on Montreal I just wouldn't touch. I mean, Suzuki and Caulfield I'd be all in for, but outside of that on Montreal, it's just too risky. So let's just go through some potential sleepers. I have a lot here. So Mangiapane to Foley, 2 guys in Calgary. If Mangiapane is a sleeper for you at this point, wake up. I'm just putting him down because I think some people are still overlooking him, especially now that Tkachuk and Gaudreau are gone. Mangiapane is going to be expected to score. Tyler Bertuzzi, Vrana, Perron, all guys underrated for Detroit. I'll also talk about it a little bit, but could this be the year Zadina finally breaks out a bit? D'Angelo, sleeper. Just a lot of people don't like him, obviously, and I just think if you look at Philly, D'Angelo could be the number 1 power play guy. That's a sleeper. McCann, I think he could produce what he did last year, maybe even more. Marty Necas, if he gets a bigger role with Carolina, we'll see. I would pick Necas over Kotkaniemi. Burakovsky could get a big role. Same with Bjorkstrand with Seattle. Done as well. Schwartz could get some more time if he stays healthy. Arizona sleepers. I think if you're getting later in the draft and Keller, Schmaltz, Krause are available, that could be an interesting one. But Gostisbehere on that number 1 power play unit, don't sleep on Gostisbehere. I picked up Gostisbehere last year in fantasy, and he was all right week to week. I put Richie in there because I'll just say this: if you're on like a Saturday or Sunday and you're wanting a couple you're needing a couple points, or you're needing like points. I think Richie could be a guy that maybe gets you an assist or goal plus a few hits. I would just put Richie as like that if he was available and Arizona played a back-to-back or something later in your week. Konechny, big bounce-back candidate for me. Definitely a sleeper. Sergachev, sleeper after the McDonough trade. He'll get a lot more ice time. Merzlikins, Kuzmenko, Garland. Going through, just ripping through the list here. Krejci, he'll get a lot of time. Second-line center, maybe Zacha. I think if he starts on the top line with no Marchand, that could be a really interesting piece there. Taylor Hall, big bounce-back candidate. I think between Hall and Zacha with Marchand out, look out for those 2 guys in your draft. Niederreiter, Granlund, I think those 2 guys could step up more and maybe take away some points from Duchesne and Johansson. Tuck, definitely interesting. I think people might look to Tage Thompson. I think Tuck, don't forget about Tuck, man. He was looking really good when he was in there. Francouz, I just think a lot of people are looking at Georgiev. I also would be concerned about going towards that tandem of Georgiev and Francouz in your draft. But again, if you're going to take both of them, so if you have Georgiev and Francouz is available late in your draft, take both. You'll have such a dub having Colorado's 2 goalies, I'm telling you. Kessel, big bounce-back candidate as well. For Hagee, Bennett, I think especially with them losing Huberdeau, they'll need more from those guys. Hampus Lindholm, especially with McAvoy out, Hampus Lindholm could put up some numbers. Forsling, Montour, underrated on Florida's defense, especially with Uyghur's absence. Lehkonen could be a big breakout candidate somewhat, but I think just a sleeper in general. If he's in that top 6 for Colorado, power play time, that could be huge for Lehkonen. Dylan Strome, Connor Brown, with no Backstrom, Wilson to start the year, they could put up some numbers. If you're looking at a pure Luc Dubois, I mean, he is trying to prove for a contract, right? It's risky, but you never know. Vetrano, Domi, Reichel, Kurashev, all guys that I think are overlooked, that, especially for the Chicago guys I just listed there, Domi, Reichel, Kurashev, could get a lot of ice time. Waiver pickups, those could be some waiver pickups there. Jenner, Roslovic, underrated guys for Columbus if one of those guys get the top line spot with Line and Gaudreau. Iafallo, always underrated with LA. We've talked about Kempe more recently. I had Kempe as a sleeper and a talking point last year. I think Iafallo's right there. Hoffman, Matheson, underrated because if Hoffman stays healthy and he's in the top 6, say Hoffman finds himself on the top line at some point, he could put up some goals, or if he gets traded, he could be a waiver pickup. Matheson, he's like the top guy for Montreal right now in defense, so if he's on the power play, it could be interesting. But Chris Weidman's also interesting there. It's between Matheson and Weidman, whoever gets that top power play time, or maybe it's someone else. Sharon Govich, if he's in the top 6 power play time, he could be really interesting, especially if he finds time with Jack Hughes. Trocheck, interesting. He's now the Rangers' second-line center. Could he get a lot of time? Nelson Lee, underrated if they put up a lot of goals. Petrie, again, I'm going to have Petrie as a sleeper plus a potential bust because it goes back and forth here. If Petrie is on no power play, he could be a potential bust. But if he finds himself on the second power play unit plus more time with Letang, he could be a sleeper too. So that's what I'm saying. Don't pick Petrie early, but if you get him late, he could also be a potential sleeper. LeBanc, it's interesting. I think with LeBanc, if he's on the top line for San Jose, gets more time. We'll see what happens with Timo Meier. Buchnevich, Krug, I think 2 guys for St. Louis. Krug could be a bounce back candidate, and Buchnevich, look out. Yarncrow, Engvall. Engvall is maybe a stretch here, but Yarncrow could be interesting if he finds himself in the top 6, like I just said, and power play time. We'll see. Hagel, Paul, Perry, all guys that could find themselves on the third line or maybe more for Tampa. And if one of those guys, if Perry finds himself consistently on the top power play unit for Tampa, there you go. Bounce back candidates. So Barzal, Hull, Malkin, Kessler, Konechny, Comtois. These are my main bounce back candidates. I usually keep the bounce back candidates to a short list here just for my candidates. Barzal, I think, will bounce back. Hull will bounce back. Malkin will if he stays healthy. Kessler will put up more production with Vegas. Konechny will bounce back. Comtois is the only one I'm questionable on. But again, it just really depends on where he is in Anaheim's depth chart. I'm also concerned about it a little bit because Sam Steele, I feel like I was looking for him to bounce back at some point with Anaheim, and then he just fell out of favor. So Comtois, definitely a hot take there, but the rest I'm confident in. Breakout candidates, Lafreniere, Zegras, Robertson, Power. I'm talking about Nick Robertson. Jason Robertson is going to be a great pick. Power, Jarvis, Newhook, Zadina, Bouchard, Beniers, Perunovic, Tomasino, Perfetti, Rossi. I'm confident in a few of these guys. Like Perfetti's going to get his time in Winnipeg. Beniers, I'm confident in that pick. Bouchard will get a lot of time with Edmonton, I believe. Newhook could be that second-line center for Colorado, and that could be massive. And Owen Power, I would pick later in your draft. Again, it's risky, but later in your draft. Nick Robertson, later in your draft if he makes the team. Waiver pickup maybe. Zegras, Lafreniere, confident. So Lafreniere, Zegras, confident. I think Lafreniere's a little risky, but still. Jarvis, confident. Newhook, confident. Like, there's a few guys there, but obviously some hot takes, like I said, with Nick Robertson, Zadina, a couple guys there. Tomasino's a really underrated one. And we'll see what Perunovic gets with St. Louis, and we'll see if Rossi gets a big-time role with Minnesota. So thank you guys so much for watching. I think it's a lot of fun to talk fantasy, and I kept going back and forth on a guy like Jeff Petrie because it's funny because I think Petrie could be underrated for putting up some points, but again, he could be a big bust pick if you're trying to pick him early. Like, that just wouldn't make sense, at least in my eyes. So that's what I'm saying, guys. Definitely balance with what I'm saying with how you're drafting, because I might say a guy is looking like a bust as a round 3 pick, a round 4 pick, a round 5 pick, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't pick him later in the draft if he's there, if he's available. Because if you have networks, you have personalities, you have analysts telling you a player's a bust, and they're usually like a top 100 pick, they might fall. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't snag them later in your draft, because while they might be a bust pick to be an early pick, snag them late and they'll end up being a sleeper. They'll end up being a steal. So hit that subscribe button, hit that like, hit the notification bell. Appreciate all the support, and I'll see you guys in the next video stream. Let me know if you have any more fantasy advice, questions, or you want more videos. See you soon. Peace.